Hey, welcome back to the Cruisily podcast. In this episode, I have a great conversation with longtime friend and client Krista Quinn. Krista is a movement professional herself, and the two of us have known each other for about a decade. Krista originally found me because she was experiencing chronic and debilitating back pain, and I had the pleasure of introducing her to applied neurology. In this episode, Krista tells the whole story about her back pain, and the two of us just go down memory lane, recalling all of the weird, cool, wacky things that we did with applied neurology to help her resolve her pain. This is a great story. I think you're going to like it. Here we go. Good morning, Krista.
Hello, Taylor.
How are you?
Good, good, well slept. So that's always a positive.
That's good. I'm pretty well slept
Yeah,
too, which
I'm good.
the last few nights have been tough because I think I was telling you earlier, I got this dental work done 2 weeks ago,
Mm,
and it's been agony, and it's been like interrupting my sleep, so it's so annoying.
mm.
And we're in a sales process right now for our fundamentals neuro course, so I'm already tired from that. But last night, thankfully, I slept through the night, so yeah, hopefully that's gonna help.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
It's
Do you Yeah.
so, go
Do you
on.
guys have do you guys have all the snow right now that
Oh
we have
yeah.
down in Boston?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. And it's snow and then there's rain. So then it forms
Mm.
this really nice layer of ice.
You got the ice crust, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really, really cold. Getting
Yeah,
my
we
walks in is like I'm doing it, but it's hard.
yeah, you got to get yourself motivated. I've been shoveling so much snow lately. I'm literally sore. So we've been moving a bunch of snow at our place, and then we shovel for a couple of neighbors, and the snow's been so heavy, but
Uh,
it's a workout. That's what I tell myself. It's a good workout, and it's a nice excuse to get outside. But man, we probably have like 3 feet of snow on the ground right now up here.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
how much it is here. But it's significant. I thought that it was gonna that like we haven't had this kind of snow for 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
yeah. Right,
So I
right.
was like, is it done?
Yeah, yeah.
Like with global warming, I was like, is that it? But no, it's back.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it's
back.
been several seasons for us up here. We haven't had significant snow like this in a while, but it's cool.
Yeah.
If it's gonna be winter time, I'd like it to be white, and get some snow on the ground.
Yeah, yeah. And we have the Arboretum. It's like run by Harvard. It's like a beautiful nature park. It's
Uh-huh.
like gorgeous. So when it snows, it's like being in the mountains. Like all the trees are covered with snow, and it makes city snow way better. Because if
Yeah.
that wasn't there, it's just like gray sludge on the street if it wasn't for
Yeah,
that
yeah.
arboretum. Yeah, but I
That's
know where
cool.
you are. It's just like you live in the mountains, so it's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. It's nice when it's white, we get the white top on the trees and the mountains. It's cool. It's cool. All right, so listen, I'm so happy to get you on the show. It's kind of been a long time coming. It was actually it was Alicia's idea, and I can't believe I didn't think of it sooner. But Alicia, not long ago, was like, "Hey, why don't you have Krista on the show?" And I was like, "I can't believe we haven't done that already." And it came up, in our thoughts and conversation because I think it was last week I shared a client story, and
Mm-hmm.
you were the client, and we talked about
Yeah.
your, parts of your journey with your back pain and how you sort of found us and got introduced to applied neurology and how you used that
Yeah.
personally, but then also got to a point where you started taking it on to use those tools professionally. So
Oh yeah.
it was just about time that you come on the
Oh
podcast and
yeah.
talk about that. So before we even get into that story, yeah, why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Where you are, what you do professionally, and we'll let it unfold from there.
Yeah, well, I'm a yoga therapist and personal trainer, but I everything that I do is through a brain-based lens now, because of you guys, really. And I work mainly with women who are experiencing mostly back pain, but sometimes I get like some chronic hip stuff. But I tend to work in that space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you still like in Boston, or are you outside of Boston?
I'm in Boston. I'm in Jamaica Plain, which is like about, I would say like 4 miles out of the city.
Yeah,
It's a really cute little town in
that's
Boston.
cool. Nice,
Yeah,
nice,
yeah. And it feels really aligned for us. So
nice. So
yeah.
let's get into your journey here, because you've got a really cool story with a lot of ups and downs.
My
But
whole life.
as as I've been as I've been witnessing for, I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like you and I first got connected. It's actually longer. It's kind of a while ago, actually. Would it be
It's
like,
so long ago. It's almost a decade.
I was gonna say, was it 10 years? My goodness, it might be around ten
Yeah.
years. And so I sort of, it's always cool as a coach, and you know this, like
Hmm.
you meet someone, you introduce them to something, they start to do the work, and you start to watch the process. And as a coach, you always know when you meet somebody who's really absorbing information, and very soon, almost immediately, whether or not they have what it takes to actually take this to the next level and go through the long-term process, not just,
Hmm.
hey, here's your homework exercises, do them for the next 4 months, 5 months. Everybody seems to think that's the process. And then if you just do your exercises, you get yourself out of pain, and you
Nope.
know, you go on, and everything's fine forever. And that's not the process when you have any kind of injury, specifically like a history of back pain. It's
Yeah.
more challenging than that, and it's not a linear process. And my goodness, if we were to draw like a graph of what that actually looks like, it would just be a bunch of scribbles. But I
Oh
think we
yeah.
would I think we would see this trend, right? I
Of
think
going
we would
up.
yeah, yeah, I think we would slowly see this trend. And I've been watching, you over the last 10 years continue to make these great improvements, and you've had lots of victories along the way, some really amazing victories early on that I think gave
Mhm.
you a lot of hope to keep moving forward. And I just want to talk
100.
about that. Yeah, I want to talk about that. And I guess a good place to start would be, when you first found Alicia and I, because this is just to give our listeners some context. This was 10 years ago that Krista and I met, and Krista actually came to our studio because at that point we had an in-person studio where Alicia and I did our one-on-one client sessions. And I can't even really remember how you found us. Do you remember?
Well, vaguely, because I saw, so this was before Instagram. You were on Facebook,
Ah,
and
yes.
I saw I you were doing, visual training. You were doing a bunch of, I mean, at that point you were using, I mean, this is just like imagery at this point, but you
Yeah.
had like a tennis ball. There were things you were doing, and I was
Yeah.
like, what is that? That I'm very intuitive, so I'm like, that feels like something that's right for me.
Mm-hmm.
And just based on that, I don't even think I don't know. I just knew. And I was like, oh, I need to reach out to them.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I
That's
did. And
cool.
somehow I found you. But it was based on the work that you were doing on social media at that time, which was way different, which is so cool. It
Yeah.
was way different from what you're doing now.
Yeah. Because at that point, I think the name of our business was probably the Movement Project. Does that ring a
Yeah,
bell?
it was something. It wasn't Cruise Elite yet.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that whole business name thing is such a joke for me because I,
It's
I
so
literally
funny.
I don't know how to make any business decisions. But like when I first came out of college and got involved as a personal trainer, I operated with the name Cruise Elite, but then I sort of dropped it.
Mhm.
And there were so many different iterations of our business. We eventually arrived at using the Movement Project, which was when we were doing our one-on-one stuff. But then we went back to Cruise Elite. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it's all a blur. But you found us and came into our studio in person, and that's how we met. And I think before I even, because my favorite part of this story comes next, because I want a chance to tell our listeners what kind of shape you were in when you came into our
Oh
studio.
my
So
God.
let me handle that part, and then you can add to it if you'd
Okay.
like. But but
Yeah.
before but before we even get there, can you tell Can you tell our listeners more about like your history and in why you found us? Because I know that you had a history of low back issues, and yeah, it'd be great to hear more details about that.
Right. So pretty much like when I was 22, which is, I won't even say how many years ago that was, but it was a long time ago. I had a laminectomy, right? And it was pretty clear, like MRI imaging, pristine spine, but then the L4, L5 crazy disc protrusion that had like calcified into bone. It was bad, right? And so I
Now,
had
was
a
that?
surgery.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm always
Yeah.
interested about this when people start talking about disc injuries. Do you think you had an injury event for that, or was this something that sort of just appeared over time?
I did. I did have an
Okay.
injury event. But it's like a little bit intimate to talk about, like when it happened, literally intimate.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
it
Only
was
share
a
what you're
weird,
comfortable with, but I am always
yeah,
curious about that because sometimes, as you know, like back pain can have injury events. Other times, it's got nothing to go with it.
100. And that I always think about that because, okay, so this was 20 something years ago and I lived in Panama. Right?
Mm.
So pain science was in its infancy. I think I was reading a book then, like Train Your Brain, and it was all about like monks and looking at their brains. But pain science to where it is right now, it was not happening then. So I went to an orthopedic surgeon and a neurologist, and they told me, okay, you have a severely herniated disc, and
Mm.
this is likely causing your pain. But I will say that my symptoms were not improving over time. It was like a steady decline. Medication actually worked, right?
Hmm.
So like there were like little clues when I look back that I'm like, and there was an injury event and it just kind of kept snowballing from there.
Sure.
But I still wonder after our work together, I still wonder like had I met you, would I needed have even needed to have the surgery,
Right. Yeah. Those questions
right?
always come up. Yeah.
But you can't, you
I've got
can't
lots
go
of
back.
I've got lots of those questions in my mind about myself and my health history as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
Like
Okay.
what? So but I do know that I woke up from the surgery and my familiar pain was gone.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's always a good sign,
Yeah.
right? That when you have a surgery and then you wake up, like that pain that was like plaguing your life is just has disappeared.
Hmm.
So anyhow, that happened. Um, but then I also had like a pretty tumultuous, I was kind of like a little bit of a wild child. I think we talked about this when I first came to see you and you were like, huh, so you got caught in barbed wire. Like, like,
I'm literally
you know
just
what?
remembering that as you say it.
You're right.
Yeah.
And you were the first person to kind of like when I said stuff like that, I saw you seeing me on many levels. Do you know what I mean? Like my whole kind of past, but even post laminectomy, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna jump back into my life. I just didn't skip a beat,
Hmm.
right? I incorporated yoga and that was like a game changer. But eventually my pain came back. And then it
Hmm.
was like the decade of episodic back pain. So by the time I got to you, I had been in like all the offices, physical therapy, chiros. I was like seeing zero balancers. I was doing all the stuff
Mm.
on top of yoga because I was teaching at that time. But nothing would get it to go away completely.
And
And
what
so
was
that
sorry, what was an episode like? Like
Oh my
what kind
God.
of
I was in the emergency room 2 times because I would
Oh
wake
wow.
up and I couldn't move, right? Like I couldn't move without being like loads of meds. But that was just not how I lived my life at that point either. You know what I mean? Like taking what is it, like oxytocin
Hmm.
or, you know? So,
Hmm.
so I was in a pretty bad place. I think this all coincided with me leaving Panama, moving to Boston. So there was a lot of,
Sure.
contributing factors to why
The
my
threat bucket.
episodes, the threat
Yeah.
bucket. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Literally.
but all of that, that's a span. I'm kind of talking about a span of 10 years. So it's a little
Hmm.
challenging to hit each
Hmm.
thing, but it was literally that I had the laminectomy. About a year or two later, the pain started slowly creeping back in. And then it became like into this chronic place. And really nothing helped until I found you guys.
All right, my turn.
Yeah.
So, so Krista finds us, and we haven't met yet, but she comes in and she's literally hobbling. Like,
Mm.
but the part of the reason is she had to come from, so we at the time our studio was outside of Boston about maybe 35 minutes, and you took the train, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
commuter rail. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so Krista takes the commuter rail to a nearby station near us, but still has to walk several miles to our actual studio, which she wasn't afraid to do, being, someone who lives in the city. But still, like, that's kind of rough when you're trying to find somebody to help you with your back pain episodes, and now you got to ride the train somewhere, and then you got to walk several miles to their studio. So she literally comes in and she's limping, and I'm thinking, oh, this is gonna be a tough first session. like like this is gonna be interesting. And on that first session we did a lot of covering your history,
Hmm.
and you know I don't think you necessarily knew what we were going to do. It was all pretty new, but it was a fun experience because
Mm.
I got to introduce you to all the basic concepts that we talk about, the pain stuff being a construct of the brain, the threat bucket. We covered your health history. You talked about your surgery. I think we had conversations about your scar from the surgery, and the session just kind of unfolded from there. And we worked together. I don't know. I can't even put a number on it at this point. Like one on one. I mean, we did one on one
Two
sessions.
years. We did.
Yeah.
We were at least 2 years.
So we started, and then we did some online too, because eventually
Mm-hmm.
we closed our studio and we
Oh,
started
you mean
booking
in
virtual stuff.
person?
Yeah, in
Oh,
person. Like, how many do you think we did?
we did like two, maximum three,
Okay, all
and
right,
then we shifted to online. Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, because you found us right at the kind of tail end of our studio, because we ended up closing that. So,
Yeah.
all right, so we start the process with Krista, and it was just really cool because Krista's a good student, and was really absorbing the information and is very body aware. But
Mm.
one of the cooler moments of our initial sessions was that she was sharing with me that she was a yoga instructor, and that she was just disappointed that she could not predict very easily whether or not she was going to be able to do the things in her yoga class that she knew she needed to do with the
Mm.
participants of her class. And one of the things that she mentioned was that she just couldn't do a forward folding motion very easily anymore. Whereas before, she was able to, go all the way down, put her palms on the floor. And
Yeah.
now she was having a lot of difficulty and pain doing that, and that really bothered her. And so we started doing some neuro testing. And the first thing that we actually did was sensory testing, because she was
Mm-hmm.
giving me a history of, basically sciatic type symptoms. And she shared, about her surgery. So anytime you have a scar on the low back, you have to consider, the sensory system, because the receptor beds have been, damaged to some degree from having a surgery. So we did a lot of sensory work. And um, the cool thing about this was, as we started doing this work, she started improving.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was the first or second session, we were able to get you to a forward folding motion, palms on the floor. And I remember you were just blown away. And I was just like, man, this is cool.
Well, I could, so what I remember, so first of all, I remember that clearly. I remember the like cranial nerve one stuff, like right, the smelling.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, please. Because if you remember specifics, I want to hear about
Yeah.
them, because I may not remember all of them.
I mean, I don't remember a lot of things, Taylor, but I remember
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like this. Um, so it was, I remember I smelled something that was like cinnamony. That you had me smell a bunch of different things.
Yep.
And there was one that made my forward fold. Like it was getting consistently better. And then I
Mm-hmm.
smelled one and it got worse.
Mm.
And that caught, because when you're first introduced to this stuff, for one, I love a little bit of I love if it's novel. I
Yeah.
just love like the feeling of it.
Hmm.
But you do kind of doubt, like, what does this smell have to do with my forward fold?
Right.
Right. So we were doing a bunch of smells and I was like, oh my gosh, my back isn't seizing. I can touch the floor. But then I smelled something else and then I lost range of motion. And that was
Mm.
almost like, oh, it was more proof that
Yes.
these stimulus were like affecting my system.
Yeah, it's almost a lot of times that's actually the biggest buy-in moment from people, especially when you're introducing them to applied neurology. Because I can't tell you,
Yeah.
this wasn't you, but I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who you're trying to bridge them into this process with the assess and the reassess. And they think at first the only reason they're getting better is because they're getting warmed up. I'm sure you deal
Right.
with
The
this.
repetitions.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
She's
Yes.
just so you guys know, she's rolling her eyes. Um, because clients will literally be like, "Oh, well, the only reason I'm getting better is because you're having me do the same movement over and over again." And then it's like, sort of
Yeah.
not really. Let me explain more about the nervous system, and then it's opportunity to educate. But, um, anyways, it's always an interesting process that way. But when somebody gets worse, like they've maybe had some improvement, they feel like they're warmed up now, but then you apply
Yep.
another stimulus and they get worse. That's almost a bigger buy-in moment for a lot of people because they're like, "Hey, what the heck? You just literally took performance away from me
Yeah.
instantly, and I want it back." And that's literally that moment where you learn about the speed of the nervous system, how the
Yeah.
right stimulus can actually immediately make you better, and the wrong stimulus can actually immediately make you worse. So, what else
Worse.
do you remember? We did smell. Okay, so we
We did
had some.
smell.
Yep.
We did vision and vestibular, which for me, well, the cerebellar stuff for me too, that
Yeah.
left-sided cerebellar work, like I just remember being amazed. And so this is what was happening too, is I could feel little micro adjustments in my muscle tone.
I remember
And I
that.
kept telling you, I was like, oh, I could feel it happening. And that was so freaking cool. And then
Yeah,
I
and
would
we
just do those drills.
yeah, and we were testing your gait, right? Because your walking was so
Yes.
compromised when your back
Yeah.
was irritated. We were testing your
Yeah.
gait, and we actually have a video, an old video
Yeah.
that you and I have
Yeah.
looked at several times together where we did an assess reassess on Krista's gait, and she goes from basically limping along and having like claw hands because she had so much tension in her body that she was trying to deal with and pain.
Yeah.
We She comes back. We do some cerebellar drilling through some joint mobility work, but also some vision because your
Yeah.
visual system is a great way to target the cerebellum. And I remember you describing those changes in muscle tone. Like you could
Yeah.
literally feel them. And Krista, all of a sudden, in this is real time for me. I'm watching her like stand up taller,
Yep.
and as those muscle tone changes are taking place from activating the cerebellum, she's just almost like getting relief from it just standing there, and then she turns around and walks, and I was like, whoa. And she
Yeah.
she had her normal gait completely restored just from a couple of cerebellar drills, and that's when I feel like that's kind of when we really started gaining some momentum.
Yes. And the thing is my hip was like, it would chronically hike the left side and it would like hike and rotate. And
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. Oh, then
Right.
people are like, I need to go to the chiropractor because my hip has hiked and rotated. And
Right.
I'm like, maybe you need to move your eyes. Like
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
you don't need to have someone crack I don't know, whatever they do. But
Right.
maybe maybe you could do something gentler. And that was the work that we did by affecting my cerebellum, as you're saying, my whole muscle tone reorganized and my hips started to drop down and come back into the balance,
That's
which
so
was
cool.
incredible to me.
It's a good way
That
to put it. Reorganize.
reorganized based on that drill.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is a really neat moment too. So, and this is what I wrote about recently in the Instagram post that I did when I was thinking about you when we were doing sensory testing, and this is pretty wild. As you were sharing your history, one of the things that you described was that every day riding the commuter rail,
Mm.
Oftentimes after riding the commuter rail, you would have a really difficult time walking, and sometimes it would increase your back pain. And that was really good information for you to share in the history, because when you are working with a person and they're sharing like lifestyle things with you, and there seems to be some kind of connection between a lifestyle thing and a pain episode or whatever, or even a lifestyle thing and improvement, you have to
Yeah.
be listening, because as a neuro coach, you're looking at everything through the neuro lens. And if somebody's telling you, hey, I feel worse when I ride the train, you can't just be like, oh, well, it must be because you sat. Right? You know how
Right.
like
That's
people just jump to the conclusion, it must be because you sat down and sitting's bad, and and it's not that simple, right? So
yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to really, you got to listen, you got to run it through the filter, is what I tell all of our students, the neuro filter. And you have to tease out, some of these things that could be happening, because as we move through the world, during our day, there's tons of different things happening to us, where we encounter all these different types of stimuli. So as Krista was sharing her history and saying that riding the train actually made her worse, I thought to myself, well, what about the train could kind of fit into this from a sensory perspective? I started to figure out very quickly what may have been going wrong, because when I started sensory testing Krista's leg, like when we do sensory testing, what we'll do is we will think about a particular spinal segment. So she had a history to go with her spine and the surgery that she had. And then
Hmm.
based on the spinal segment where there may have been some injury or surgery or both, you want to start thinking about the cutaneous distribution of the nerves that originate in that spinal segment, and where those nerves go and what do they supply. So
Yeah.
with nerves, sometimes you've got sensory only nerves, sometimes you have motor only nerves, sometimes you have both sensory and motor nerves. That means that the nerve supplies the skin and muscles. And
Hmm.
and so what we did was sensory testing along those distributions to see whether or not Krista could accurately feel sensations, like appropriately feel sensations. And one of the things that I recall happening was when I tested vibration along certain parts of Krista's leg, or it may even have been near your scar from your surgery, I think it was a high frequency vibration made you worse.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I was like, oh, okay. So I wonder if riding the commuter rail and the vibration that her nervous system has to deal with, I wonder if that is the mechanism for, causing her to walk, poorly afterwards and increase her pain. And so a lot of the work that we did was sensory based, and we had to kind of de-threat her sensory system by uh, doing all sorts of stuff, like Krista mentioned, vision stuff, vestibular stuff, but also other sensations we had to bring into her training.
But we did what we did. So I remember this clearly, and I'm about to do a post on it at some point. But we used a paper clip.
Oh yeah.
And I remember that paper clip working with my scar tissue with that paper clip. Oh, and I still use this till
Poking
this
it, poking it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I remember I was so like diligent about it that there was a point where I broke skin and I was like, maybe I need to back off a little bit. But it
Yeah.
works it works
Yeah,
so
because
well.
that's funny, because you liked that sensation so much.
Yeah, and it would work. Like I would do it and I would have a reduction in pain. I would feel that sense again. And so I would use it like Advil. So I would just
Right.
like, and
And
then
this is
the other,
literally just so I can, give, because a lot of our listeners are going to know exactly what you're talking about, because
yeah.
we teach this, in our courses. But if you don't know what we're talking about, what Krista did was she took a paper clip and bent it, and then literally was poking her skin to create a sensation of slight discomfort. So like not
Yeah.
necessarily like extreme pain, but paper clip, the end of it's going to be pokey. So we're looking for slight discomfort, and that is one of the specific sensations that we test and potentially use as a training stimulus as well.
Mm. Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
the
so you were
kinesio
using
tape.
that a lot. Oh yeah.
because we worked with the compass positions and then we found the position. And I still, like yesterday, I went to a yoga class. And so I train with you online. So I do the strength dojo, which I've
Hmm.
now been doing. I've now been strength training for I don't know how many years because of our work together.
Right,
And so,
because you
I'm
couldn't do
still
that
in the
before.
dojo. No, I couldn't lift weight before. And so, but now strength training is my main practice, strength and mobility. But I love yoga. But sometimes the deep flexibility kind of throws me off a little bit. Like it's not, I
Hmm.
love the feeling, but it's not the best for me, for my
Hmm.
body. So I use kinesio tape. Anytime I'm going to do something like that, I just find that compass position, use the kinesio still till this day. So
Pulling,
like
so using the tape and pulling the tape in a very specific direction.
in a very specific direction because we worked with the scar and we found that like I think it well I don't it's down diagonal down right. And if you
Hmm.
think about it, like the way my hip tends to want to hike is
Hmm.
like up left. So there was
Hmm.
something there as well. And
Hmm.
I still use it anytime I'm gonna do something that's a little bit harder for
Yep.
my nervous system to kind of
Yeah, that's
keep
cool.
things.
That
Yeah.
that scar testing is such an amazingly useful tool, and it's so easy.
Mm,
Again, just a little context on that, because this is something that I actually don't get to go into very deeply in our courses. I do this on with one-on-one sessions,
mm,
and I explain it in our courses, but we don't get as much time to go into it because virtually it's a little bit challenging. But basically, what we did with Krista was we tested the skin around her scar that was on her lower back, and it's a very gentle process. You take
mm,
the most superficial level of the skin, so it's basically just the friction of my hand against her skin, not really pressing deeply or anything. And what you begin to do is you move the skin in all the cardinal directions of a compass. And
mm,
you're moving the skin to its end range and you're assessing how supple the end range is by moving it in that
mm,
direction. And you'll find that some directions are quite healthy and supple, and the skin will have this like nice end feel where it's like springy. And then you'll find that other directions have more of a restriction. So you go to move the skin, and
mm,
rather than it being springy, you run into a barrier, is what we call it. So
mm,
oftentimes, what we do in this testing process, because we test everything, is each direction you retest with maybe movement or levels of pain, whatever you're working on. Usually, we test how the barriers assess first, because most of the time, people do best when you move the skin into the barrier. And if that
mm.
doesn't work, you do the opposite, and sometimes that's the way to go. But in Krista's case, I think we found a barrier, tractioned the skin in that direction, and then applied kinesio tape to essentially do the same exact thing that my hand was doing. And it's an
Yeah.
amazing tool because you just need a single piece of tape about the size of the palm of your hand. And the reason it can be so beneficial is because the stimulus becomes ongoing because you can wear
Yeah.
the tape. So you put the
Yeah.
tape on, traction in the right direction, and now instead of Krista needing to be dependent on me in my hand, which really irritates me about a lot of traditional therapies, because when you know stuff about the nervous system, you know that the stimulus needs to be applied frequently.
Yep.
And this is why it really bothers me that in our culture with all these different therapies, everything is based around a business model. Nothing seems to be based around actual neurology and pain science. And if that were reversed, and I'm not saying this is realistic, but if that were reversed, you would go to your therapist every single day, 2 days, two times, three times, whatever, and you would get the applied stimulus that's helping you. But
Yeah.
that's not realistic. So when we have sensory tools that we can apply to the body and they become a passive stimulus, like a piece of kinesio tape, Krista gets to wear the tape while she does other things like yoga or lifting weights or just going to work and walking through the city. And now you're
Yep.
applying the high payoff stimulus over and over and over again. And that's a great way to make change.
Yeah. And it's interesting now that you're saying that. I remember that because I was in physical therapy for like at least half a year, maybe longer before I met you. And he would move my sacrum and I would feel better. But I would only last a little bit and then I have to go back. So like you so aptly, I think it was the first or second session, you figured that out and then you gave me a way to literally make it stick.
Nice.
Right. And like use it in my life. And yeah.
Yeah, and we have to we can't forget to say too, like you had to do the work, right? So you
Oh,
had and you did the work. I mean, you did a lot of work, and you did your homework exercises. You were consistent. Oftentimes you had setbacks, and you had to train
oh
yourself out of the
yeah.
setback. Can you talk about just? I know you've had several of them. I'm not even necessarily talking about one in particular, but kind of walk us through that process.
Well, I think so. I think the way I could describe the first like meeting with you in person was like a sigh of relief. Like I remember leaving there. It wasn't perfect, but you also left me, and I'll just say this before I answer the question, but you
Hmm.
also left me with think of as many B names as you possibly can. as you're as
I
you're
don't remember
walking
this, so
back,
I'm smiling.
as I walk back to the T, you're like, I want you to think about this. And that helped me to kind of like I knew I didn't know then, but I know now I was retraining my brain out of that pain state. And thinking of all the B names. And then you're like, when you think of all the B names, switch to S and just go through the alphabet. And that like got me all the way home. But I felt a sense of like, oh, I found the thing. I found the thing that's going to help me. And so I knew that I had to keep going. So that was part of the thing that made me so like dedicated to the process and
Right, right.
was that I did feel like found it.
That's the hope moment.
The hope moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge because when you're dealing with pain, this is why the assess reassess process is so important. There's a lot of reasons it's important, but this is a big one, especially when you're introducing somebody to applied neuro. It engages them in a new way because most of the time when people have tried all the things and gone to all the different therapists, nobody ever asks them for their opinion about how
Yep.
something feels afterwards. Sometimes, you know, you are asked, but it puts you in a position where you're kind of afraid to say, actually, I'm worse. You know what I
Yep.
mean? There's like pressure in a sense.
Yep.
But when you
Because you want to
engage,
please them.
yeah, yeah. When you engage someone in an assess reassess and you make sure, because I educate all my students and clients to never become emotionally attached to the result. It's
Mm.
just marking data. Better, same, or worse. And I sometimes there's a handful of times in my career where I had to be like, hey, I can see that you want me to do, like, you want me to feel like I've done a good job, and I appreciate that, but don't worry, like, I'm okay if we're wrong. I just
Yeah.
want to mark the progress and move to the next thing, or if we don't hit our target, we're going to move to the next thing. So there's this moment of hope where, you know, you get a result and you're like, wow, this is real. I just proved to myself that I can get better. And
Mm.
what do we always say? We're aiming for one pain-free repetition. And as long as we can find one pain-free repetition, we know two is possible. And you're
Yeah.
you're proving to your brain that two is possible. And if two is possible, three is possible. And that's kind of the process mentally that's so important so that people can attach to the result. Because a lot of people get something done at a therapy and they check off the box as if, okay, I attended my therapy. I attended my physical therapy, whatever I did. And they miss those moments to consciously attach to what actually happened. And
Right.
if you don't attach to that, you're missing a very large part of the retraining the brain
Mm.
to have less pain. So and
Hmm.
I saw you go through that moment of hope, and that's cool. Like I, neuroscience is often described as the science of hope,
Yep.
and that's how it was for me personally too. Is you feel better and you attach to that, and it's just such a big part of it. But so when you were going through that moment, yeah, what was that like? Like, did you see yourself doing things later on down the road that maybe you never thought you'd be able to do again, or where did
Oh
how did
yeah.
that
Yeah.
work in your mind?
Well, like I think I think when I don't know, it's kind of like, when you found the thing that's going to help you. I just kind of knew with like your support, and because like I knew you were supporting me, but Alicia is like, she's always there.
Mm-hmm.
She's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I knew that she was like telling like, well, what if we tried? I know you guys are talking about it too.
totally.
Like a lot of people don't know about Alicia, but like
Yeah,
you guys are like two peas in the neuropod, like right of
yeah,
Cruise Elite. Um, but like the both of you, just I knew I had found the right support,
that's cool.
right? But that kept me through the setbacks because there are always setbacks when you are trying to retrain your brain out of pain and then condition your body,
Yeah, so
right?
true.
And we did both of those, like over the span of 2 years. Anytime like a flare came up, you would have a tool. Like I would text you and I'd be like, Taylor, it's pretty bad today. Like this is a bad, and you would be like, okay, try this. Right. And then something about that level of support and then always having something to try. And that was
Mm-hmm.
always new.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was like a new novel experience. That
Yeah,
was
and you
really
yeah, and you didn't have to rely on someone else, really. I mean, sure, I was giving you an idea, but you didn't need somebody else's hands. You know, you
right.
didn't have to feel dependent. So it's very empowering, I think, when you start to go through this process and then you build a toolbox
Yep.
and you know that if you need those tools in the moment, you have them. And
Yep.
that's also huge for the process, to the retraining process, because a lot of times we feel dependent on other things, or we feel like there's something out there that might help me, but I can't afford it, or
Yep.
whatever the obstacle might be. Poking yourself with a paperclip is something anyone can do.
So inexpensive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
doing it, learning how to do a joint mobility drill, staring at the tip of a pen, and doing a vision drill. That's one of the things I love most about applied neuro is that you don't need all this fancy stuff. You can go really really far with basics.
oh yeah. Yeah. And as like, as a, wellness professional now, like I use all of those things.
Yeah, let's
Like
talk about
everything
that.
you taught me, it's almost like I have it like imprinted on my brain literally,
Yeah.
right? And I use them. And I've like over the years of doing them, like, and you also because once I was out of like that critical place, which you always say this, it takes about a year to get to like an 80% place, right? You're still a little tender with your injury, or
Mm-hmm.
not your injury, but well, maybe some of it's an injury, some of it's how your nervous system's reacting,
Mm-hmm.
but 80%. And then the next year we started training. Like then you started bringing in like some more training concepts, like
Right.
strength training, right? And then
Yeah.
you started explaining to me, like becoming even more of a mentor in the neuro piece of everything that we were doing. So you would
I,
start explaining to me like why things were working.
yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because people who are going to listen to this episode who are working through a long-standing pain issue, who are going to relate with your story, this is a really critical point that Krista brings up. When you're working to get out of pain, what we call that first 6 months to a year is the threat reduction phase. And
Mm,
so what goes into that is a bunch of drilling and yeah, just doing high payoff exercises that are going to help you move better and feel better. And those are like the rehab type things. And that will be generally a process of 6 months to a year. And so it does, oftentimes it takes a full year for this like really amazing transformation to happen. Although there's lots of victories along the way,
hmm.
within a year, you have this really amazing transformation where you really witness yourself become healthier. And eventually, what has to happen is you got to go into a place where now you're going to reintroduce threat. And this is the piece that is still to this day just a total miss by the
Mm.
therapy industry, because everybody goes to their physical therapist or whatever, they check the boxes, even maybe they get somewhere, but then all of a sudden, once physical therapy is over, there's this gap between what is rehab and what is fitness or training or some sort of intense activity you want to do with your body. And people struggle in that gap because there hasn't been any reintroduction of threat. So Krista really understood this concept, and like you said, you started strength training,
Yep.
which
Which
is
is very
amazing.
hard for me, Taylor, because
Yeah.
I'm a like
Yeah.
tried and true yogi,
Yeah.
right? And it was really threatening. So like
Yeah.
I was slow and steady, but like with your sort of mentorship and support, like I was able, and now I love it.
And by the way, everybody, I got a Yogi to buy a barbell and weights,
It's sitting over here.
which is an accomplishment. I mean,
Yeah, when
she
I
still has it. I mean, granted, she still has it in an open floor, in an open room with no furniture, and
yeah.
that kind of thing. But it's a
It
barbell and
still has
weights.
to be in the yoga vibe. I don't have a
Yeah,
rack yet, but
yeah. Hey, that's totally cool. And
I
and so
love
you're
it.
lifting weights, you're deadlifting, you're doing all sorts of stuff now, and it's awesome.
No, like after our that two because it was 2 years, right? Um, I was actually able to get back into yoga more deeply in my own practice because I was still teaching, but I work predominantly with beginners. So I
Yeah.
don't really teach advanced forms, but my practice is a little bit more advanced.
Uh huh.
And I was able to do some of the most advanced arm balancing, right? After our work together. Um, just like, and now because of the strength training, it also supports my yoga practice in such a real way. Like they go together so beautifully.
That's
So
great.
it's been like it's just been it's been a life transformation for me
Yeah.
from like start to finish of
Clearly.
our
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
together.
It's
And the
it's
other
been really fun
thing,
to watch.
and it keeps giving. I know this is a kind of a story, but I've never been able to dance salsa. Like I'm originally from Panama. I've
Hmm.
had aunts, tias, trying to teach me how to do this. Couldn't capture it. They gave up on me. They were like, forget this girl. Like so my dad's always like,
Is
she
that is
can
that
dance
why
to
you
like
had to move? Is that why you had to move to the U.S.?
I moved to the US. I meet you and now I can dance. But I think it's a real testament to the joint mobility training, the
Yeah.
creating better maps in my motor and sensory core. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
all of the work to talk about cerebellar function, like being able to actually dance and coordinate and like that's
Yeah.
been
That's
a big
awesome.
deal for me too.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. I remember you sharing with me early on that dancing is something that you wanted to be able to do again, more.
Well,
I do remember
when
that.
you have back pain,
Yeah.
dancing feels like that
Yeah.
freedom of movement in the midline, you feel so stiff and stuck
Right.
that you'll never be able to kind of move freely.
Yeah. And I
And
saw you.
that's
I saw you moving freely, like doing some crazy stuff on Instagram.
oh
Last week in the post you did where you're doing like the spinal wave and stuff.
oh
Where you were like I don't know what
I was
it was
hanging on
funky.
a
You were hanging.
yeah, I was doing it was just like in a down dog spinal tractioning, but I'm able to undulate my spine. Like I'm able to practice
That's cool.
handstand to do all the things. Taking
Yeah,
hip
that's
hop.
awesome. You
Yeah,
are?
it also
You're taking
yeah,
hip
oh
hop?
I was taking hip hop for a while and shuffle. So I've been able to pretty much do
That's great.
everything.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. If we could
Yeah.
just backpedal for a moment, because I just wanted to go back to how you're using applied neuro in the work that you do, and I'm just realizing I'm not really up to speed on what your practice looks like right now. Are you teaching classes and doing one-on-one sessions with people?
It's mostly one-on-one virtual, and I
Gotcha.
teach one Thursday group class that's like yoga mobility. And we definitely sprinkle in the assess and reassess and bring in some of the applied neuro into the
Hmm.
yoga mobility. But yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, mostly virtually,
Do you have
which is
a
awesome.
do you have a story that comes to mind, and maybe it's the short version, but do you have a story that comes to mind with something that you taught a client that was applied neuro that really helped them with a goal that they had?
Um, just actually, just just actually yesterday, I'm working with someone who's in a kind of, she reminds me of me. She reminds me of me 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we actually used the paper clip sensory
Mm-hmm.
for her, and we kind of worked along the dermatomes, so like you
Mm-hmm.
were talking about.
Yeah.
And she was like amazed that it helped her improve. She's still in a pretty like critical
Mm-hmm.
place, but that's just off the top of my head. Oh, and we did so I was shocked because a lot of her pain is on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
So based on some of the stuff that I've learned from you, I was assuming that maybe it was like a right side PMRF and maybe her
Mm-hmm.
left side cerebellum needed some stimulus. That was my like
Mm-hmm.
hypothesis. But
Sure.
when we tested it, it turned out that it was right side.
Mm.
And so we basically created like some complex nonlinear movements on the right side, and her foot tapping improved immediately. But
Nice.
then when we went too far, I think we did wrist circles.
Yep.
We did wrist lines, but then when we did wrist circles, it took her too far and it made it worse.
Mm.
So like she was kind of amazed at
That
how
that damn minimal effective dose.
the minimal effective dose. And she's in such a, because
Sensitive.
I'm
Yeah.
a sensitive place that we
Yeah.
really have to work,
Mm-hmm.
very sensitively, right?
Yeah.
But those that framework, I always think about the framework when
Mm-hmm.
when I'm working with clients, if they'll accept it.
Right.
Sometimes you have to get them, you have to trick them. No, I
Yeah.
don't know if we
Yeah.
should say that, but you do have to like
Yeah.
a
But
spoonful
it's
of sugar.
yeah. Totally. It's that combination of giving somebody what they want and what they need, and just trying to it's bridging that gap. Including enough education to get them to the point where they'll take on all the stuff that seems weird, that's not weird to us, but it doesn't get old. It doesn't get old for us to witness those changes, and it's still exciting. And even as a coach, sometimes you go, did that really help this person like that? Because that's kind of crazy.
You feel the miraculousness of it. You
Yeah,
mean like
yeah,
even, yeah.
yeah. Even though I know the neurology, I understand the
Mm,
pathway. I understand that if I do pencil push-ups with somebody, there's a good chance that their hip flexors are going to function better. You know what I mean?
right.
Like, and I know the neurology, and I can see the pathway visually in my mind. I can see the midbrain. I can see cranial nerve 3.
Mm.
I can see it, innervating, the medial rectus muscles and pulling the eyes in, and I can see all this happening. But trying to get a client to a point where they can understand it enough to just kind of freely go all in the process is tough.
It's
Some of them
definitely,
will, but in some of them it takes longer.
but you know what I do for the ones, can this is all based on the work we've done and the mentorship I've received from you. So anything that makes it look more athletic, but it's also training the system goes
Mm.
down well.
Ah,
So
good point.
infinity walk, they always feel really athletic with that. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, if you don't want to do VORs, then you'll do the infinity walk and they'll feel like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
feeling more athletic, but they're also getting the vestibular stimulus and also the coordination chart,
Yeah. Big time.
right? And especially for older clients, like they love it. Like they
Yep.
love the coordination chart and versus maybe like some isolating the eyes.
Right.
So I think there's a way in, but especially because, I'm in Boston. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like epidemiologists and,
Mm-hmm.
that's so I have to like package it in a
Mm-hmm.
way
Yeah,
to
you got to have a little bit of science to share, or people are going to think it's
share.
hocus pocus.
Right. And some, I had a client who we were doing I had her doing like, VORs and a farmer's carry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like shocked because I just peppered that in and I was like, let's just see how this goes. And she's like, oh, I
Yep.
really like this. And I was like explaining to her the science. And she's like, Krista, I really appreciate the science, but I also like the wonder of it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
they're nice, nice.
she's like an epidemiologist. So I think there's that. As a yogi, I kind of have accepted the science and
Mm-hmm.
the like the belief.
Totally.
There's like this really nice mix. So I
Yeah,
call it like the art and the science.
and I can see the work you do has a nice combination of that, for sure. Which you are, you're into art.
Well, I came here to go to Berkeley. So
Yeah, that's
I'm a
right.
musician. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. And with vibration, I was thinking about that. I'm like, ah, sound waves. Like I was always around music and I
Yeah.
always and I had I had a client who would tell me that her pain would flare most when she was playing guitar and
Mm.
singing for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it really stumped me. Of course, I thought sitting, the biomechanical, you're like, okay, maybe she's sitting. But I also thought like about the vibrational component too, like if she was sensitive to that
Mm.
and singing is vibrating, like when
Oh, and that's
sound
huge
waves hit it,
output too.
right? And then
Yeah.
there's a whole host of things that are happening, but because of the way that I learned from you on like it's truly holistic
Yeah.
to look at things like biomechanically, neuromechanically, applied
So true.
neuro. There's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Neurology. I was just describing this. I did when I taught our master class yesterday. One of the things that I was describing was one of my favorite parts about neurology, and that's the fact that you actually can look this stuff up.
Mm,
If you want to learn more about it, you can actually look this stuff up. And I was trying to make a point to them, where like if you want to know what a VOR is, a vestibulo-ocular reflex, you could literally ask Dr. Google, and you will get information back on the vestibulo-ocular reflex. If you want to know what
yeah.
nerve is involved with that, you can find out what nerve is involved in that. If you want to know where that nerve goes and where does, what parts of the brain does it affect or how does it interact with our muscles in our body, you can actually look this stuff up, which is my
Yep.
favorite thing about it because of spending so many years looking for going through a continued education process where you learn a system, you pay lots of money. Gosh,
Mm,
Alicia and I, we did so many things and we spent so much money in almost every single one of those systems that we paid to learn ended up getting us to a place where we're like this is garbage because you
yeah.
get to a place where they run out of words to use to describe what's happening, and because they
Yeah.
don't go deeper into neurology, they start making stuff up. And then you have these gurus that are literally just making words up to replace the fact that they don't know the answers at this point to why what they're doing may be helping, or they're not acknowledging the times that it doesn't. And
Right.
so the thing I love about applied neuro is you can look it up. You can actually understand what's happening with neurology, and that to me, to your point, is what makes it the most holistic of all the biological sciences. Is, we always say, oh, well, everything's connected. Well, guess what? It is. And if you want to look it up, you can. I love that about
Well,
it.
and so there's a lot of research into the vagus nerve
Yeah.
now, right? You're the OG. Like you've been doing this forever.
Now it's
Like
getting popular, the Vegas stuff. Yeah.
but that's cranial nerve 10. And also sound therapy and implications in pain suppression. But
Right.
you've known that with CN8 and brainstem, working with the brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely like I definitely feel like now is like kind of like a really
Yeah. I talk about this with Alicia a lot. So the world is ready for the neuro discussion. Like we have arrived there. And what's happening is, like you're saying, there's lots of different things out there now, lots of different educators using the language.
right.
What what my observation is, though, and this is going to take many more years to get to a point where people are understanding the applied neuro part, because
Yeah.
like the pendulum swings, right? People are really good. Like learning how to talk the talk is not hard, especially if
Hmm.
you like learning. Learning how to walk the walk is hard because being a technician requires you to understand a tool set, an assessment process. You have to have years of experience. You have to have client experience, and that's how you start to understand how to actually apply it. There's all this technology coming out. Like, okay, we know the vagus nerve is important. Let's activate it with this, or we
Hmm.
know we know sound waves can be used to help with pain. Let's play some sound. And so what I think you're going to see is that people are going to be talking about neuro in a very isolated way.
Right.
That is good, but it is nowhere near what can truly happen when you understand how to apply the stimulus for better learning of a skill, or better learning to dismantle pain. It's like we can't get out of that therapeutic mindset of, hey, come on into my office, let me hook you up to this machine. This is going to activate your vagus nerve, and in 20 minutes you can go home and we'll see you again next week. That's the kind of thing that's going to
Right.
be happening in the industry when it comes to neuro first. And I'm not even
Hmm.
saying that it's bad, but it is so incomplete compared to what can happen with applied neuro.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think that's what, but I think that it also can help make it easier
Yeah,
for us.
easier transition.
Well, and to explain, like, hey, check out this paper. Is it a far stretch that I'm having
Yes.
you put listen to a sound stimulus in your right ear to
Right.
affect your gluteal
Yep.
tone,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think it's helpful to like, because people are like, oh, I've heard of that. Oh, I know
Totally.
that's happened.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. I
but
agree. You're right.
I
So, okay. Well, I want to respect your time here. I know that you got clients and stuff that you have to get to. This has been awesome. I guess what I would love to hear from you before we start to wrap it up is, what advice do you have for people who are in a similar situation as to, what you went through with your initial back pain slash injury? I know that this is a big part of who you are as a coach, because you're educating your
Mm.
clients on how to move through a process. And as we talked about, it is a process. It's always a long-term process. It's not linear. There's so many ups and downs. What kind of advice could you give to somebody who is in a similar situation where they're motivated, they're searching for new information, and they're ready to engage that process?
There is so much. There is so much. But I think the number one thing is a willingness to believe in the process,
Mm,
right? And even if, because we all have those little voices that are what is this? But even if you can kind of suspend disbelief to give it a long enough time to work. So I think that I'm possible, like it's
yeah.
possible for me to do the impossible, and I believe that I can. Being it right. And the thing with the work that you do is that you almost help your clients and you have students now, right? In the neuro.
Yeah, I still work one-on-one with people in our community. So I'm still doing one-on-one, but yeah, students. Yeah, we have students in our courses.
That you kind of help that belief process,
Right,
right? And once you can do that, then you're just going to stay the course
right.
until you get through it, and you're going to get through it. Like I kind of just try to hold that, because I think that that is what happened. Like I knew I wanted to really, I was really ready to overcome this pain, and it was bad. Like it was holding me back for a decade,
Right.
right? And then when I found you, I was like, I felt it in my, I felt like, oh, I got that sense of like, this is going to work. And then I was like, I'm committed. And no matter what, like, I just stuck with it. And I think that is what I always recommend. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, and that's huge too, especially for anybody who's listening who's been in pain, chronic pain, right? The
yeah,
behavior change part of that is the hardest part about getting out of pain. Is
yep,
you literally have to change your behavior, right? It's not just
yep.
about doing your homework
You're,
drills necessarily. There's going to be things within your lifestyle that has to change. You're going to have to, like Krista's talking about, you're going to have to change your belief system. These are all the kind of rewiring things that have to happen that don't get discussed nearly enough. That is also a part of doing the stuff we always talk about, doing the right exercises and doing them consistently. There's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it.
yeah. And I feel like that's the other thing that because I know you get this a lot, I get this a lot. The question is like, what exercise should I do? Like, give me XYZ exercise for this. And it's about the whole system of how you approach it,
Yeah, well said.
you
That's
know?
awesome.
Because even in the strength dojo, we strength train in a very specific way. We're not just like, what is it? I don't know what the phrase is when you're in a gym and you're like pumping on. We're not just
Pumping
like,
iron.
yeah,
Pumping
right. Is
iron,
that
yeah. I pumped
right?
iron for a while when I was younger. Yeah, we're not just pumping iron. We're learning to move better, you know.
Learning to move better, and the structure of it is in such a way that it's also in really nice alignment. Like I always say, the strength dojo feels like yoga to me. The way that it's organized is very mindful,
Yeah, that's cool.
and it's because of the applied neuro and the way that you weave it in.
That's cool.
um
I'm just
yeah.
realizing too as we sit here and have this conversation, like you're sitting on the floor, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
even think early on when we first started our sessions together, I don't even think you'd be sitting on the floor. And I'm just seeing you just like comfortably sit there and, whatever, readjust. And that's awesome.
No, like I'll be on the couch, which again, I got rid of my couch because I couldn't sit on it when I had this crazy back pain.
No kidding.
But I was on my couch, and I was just like slumped. I had my computer, and I was so proud, like because we're taught in traditional therapy, neutral spine, stay
Right.
upright, like all. And I remember I'd be at parties, and I would be like, they'd be like, wow, I can tell that girl's a yoga teacher just by how upright her spine is. But it was because I was like
Yeah.
so scared to like
Yeah.
do anything. But now, like after our work, and let's be real, like we've been now working together a decade. It's like we don't work
Hmm.
together one to one anymore, but like I've still been in the dojo now and I still do it 2 times a week, you
That's
know?
awesome.
Um, and now I'm just like I'm rolling on the floor, like I'm doing all sorts of really
Doing the ninja
cool
stuff.
things, the ninja stuff,
That's
and
really
it's
great.
like it's really thanks to you, um, and Alicia, and I'll Snoop Dogg it a bit, and to the hard work,
Of course. Yeah, you got to
right?
you've got to take yeah, you've got to take that credit cuz that was a difference going back to when we started this conversation as a coach when you start working with somebody who is in a position like you were. It's very easy to tell right away whether or not they have what it takes. to engage the whole process and see it through. And that was obvious to me at the beginning that you did. And, you know, it's a testament to your hard work and, you know, all the learning that you had to do in the process. And now you've accomplished something huge personally, but you're also now passing it on to others professionally. Pretty awesome. Been fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's literally like you guys have all my gratitude. Because professionally too, what it's done, it's just opened up the world because all of the modalities are good. Yoga's good, strength training's good, mobility's good. But when you apply that neuro lens, it really does, you start to see like, oh, this is why the yogis move their eyes in all these different poses. Like I understand because of the applied neuro.
That's cool.
Right? It really opens, or you understand in strength training how actual load, like you talk about this, can actually calm the nervous system. Like it can actually be a really, really grounding force. But you wouldn't know that if you were just
That's a good point.
Strength training regularly. So everything that you guys taught me is like just expanded everything.
Running those things through the neuro filter. You learn a lot about, you know, what it can offer and why it might be helping, and sometimes why it might not be helping. You know, again, that's why I love neuro. It sort of removes the argument for which thing is best, and you just start seeing everything as an available tool instead. So, hey, listen, this was amazing. I can't believe it took us this long to get you on the podcast. We'll have to do it again. You know, we'll find an excuse to do it again and have a different conversation. But at this point, I'd love for you to just tell our listeners how they can follow along with you and learn from you.
I think the best way would be to connect with me on Instagram, and that's the Happy Low Back Yogi. So just exactly how it sounds, and Yogi is YOGI. So Yogi. Yeah. Awesome. Taylor, thank you. It's been awesome, like going down memory lane.
Yeah, it has. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Thanks, Taylor.
Peace out. All right, there it is. I hope you enjoyed Krista's story. And if you are somebody who's struggling with chronic back pain, I hope that this story gives you some encouragement and some hope to know that there are tools available that can help you overcome your pain. If you're a health and movement professional and you want to start learning applied neurology so that you can help your clients, then you definitely need to check out our neuro courses. The best resource for you right now is to check out our free Neuro Masterclass, and you can sign up for that using the link that you can find in the show notes. That's it for this episode. Thank you all for listening.